somebody say something over there?
Say something over here.
Hello, testing.
Testing.
It's good. All right, it's good, Devin, thank you.
Yay.
Okay. And yeah, we'll do this if it ever happens again.
All right, well, write it down. I do enjoy talking to you though, Devin.
Okay. Have a good week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Okay, we've done the roll call, we've done the Pledge of Allegiance. My apologies to the folks, we had a little audio trouble there, and we should be up and running. We're on number 3, amendments to the agenda. And we have one, correct, to postpone the, should we take care of that this one?
You could just take it as the item.
When we
as
get to
comes
it.
up.
Okay, any other amendments to the agenda?
I'd like to talk about future meetings at the end, just scheduling out next couple months.
Okay. So we'll add future meeting discussion. Next is anybody else have anything? Anybody have any problems adding that?
No.
Seeing none, acceptance of meeting minutes. Does anybody have any comments on either one, or we can do them both together?
I actually have comments on both,
Okay, June 5th, let's start with that.
which it's super easy. It's the spelling of my name.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know who Mark Deere is, but all through anytime I made a motion or seconded, it's in here is Mark Deere.
You?
It's DERR,
It's DERR, it's the proper spelling, yep.
we'll spell check and we'll fix that. Okay, do I have a motion to spell Mark's name correctly?
Please,
Please do.
Second.
Okay, on both of them, any other comments on either one or both?
Any objections?
No, no.
Not supposed to ask.
Does anybody have any objections to spelling Mark's name correctly? Seeing none, any other comments on June 5th, July 10th meeting?
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes for June 5th and July 10th with the corrections, with the correct spelling of Mark's name.
Second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If you approve, please raise a hand. And it passes unanimously. The ways my days is going, it'll go off in the middle of the meeting. Okay, we've done the minutes. Informational exchange on non-agenda items, town officials. Mr. Thabarge.
Just two items. The first is that the code officer has issued his monthly report. To date, there have been 6 new single-family homes built in Durham in 2024. There have been 4 accessory dwelling units added, which I'm not sure if that's precipitated by the new state law or other factors, but as you know, we're supposed to be monitoring housing starts. If it gets up to 45, that triggers the discussion of a potential moratorium update of the comprehensive plan. Obviously, we're not even close to getting there. The other issue is codification, the project to transform the current land use ordinance, which is either in PDF or hard copy, into a digital format so to be more easily accessed. That process is going to scrub the current language to try to fix a lot of issues with confusion, and we'll see how that comes out. And that they have given me the new framework. They're trying to organize it in a more consistent, standardized arrangement of provisions. And so we're continuing with that work. The next step will be for them to do that legal review.
Okay, thank you. Anything on the vision for this corner right here? The corner of 9 and 136?
The select board has appointed a steering committee. Some really very qualified people going to serve on that, architects, engineers, those types of people, building experiences. And we are getting together with Greater Portland Council of Governments, their staff, to kind of update the scope and time frame, and we'll hopefully be meeting with this steering committee sometime in August to get the project rolling in September.
Okay, any questions for George?
I have just a couple. The codification, is that something we're going to vote on Like,
It
The-
will eventually go to the select board and the planning board. We're hoping that depending on how much they find and how difficult it is to get everything reorganized. It's kind of like when we did the comprehensive plan, we first came in, I did an overhaul of the land use ordinance. It used to be pretty much illegible before that. So I did some reorganization, just kind of manually, as opposed to this much higher level review. And so they're now taking that format and putting it into their standard, which is used by most towns in terms of the numbering system, and setting it up so that the town in the future will be able to add other ordinances. So, and then what they will do is help us identify some of the key issues. Some of these we've been talking about for years, like cell towers, solar farms. See, they're not gonna give you the policies for those things. What they're gonna do is take your current policies and just put them into the appropriate legal framework. If there are problems with violations of state law, try to reconcile those. For example, mobile home parks. Your regulations were adopted probably back in the early 1980s or even earlier, and they haven't been updated to meet the current state law requirements. 20 years ago, the state legislature did kind of the same thing on mobile home parks as it's doing now on an accessory dwelling unit. So they'll be looking at those sorts of things. Now, if you just want to go with the state standards for mobile home parks, then that's a simple thing. But if you want to do something different, as allowed by the law, with what limited flexibility you have, I don't see that as a big policy issue, but there are some others, gravel pit management for those sorts of things, that your provisions are way outdated. So they will not give you, they'll give you a sample or perhaps a set of examples of how different towns do it, but it's really up to this town to tailor its ordinances to deal with those policy issues. Durham obviously has a high emphasis on rural agriculture and those sorts of things. So different towns treat certain things different, like solar farms we just went through. Brunswick has, they have much more liberal provisions, but they put them in commercial industrial areas mostly. So you can tailor the ordinance according to your community's values, goals, comprehensive plan recommendations. So they will not be giving you solutions for those things. They'll be giving you examples, and then we'll have to work through those policy issues after.
yeah, so this is really just a cleanup, right?
It's
That
a
doesn't really need a
cleanup.
vote, it's gonna help us,
Yeah,
and
it's
then
a
anything that comes out of that, we need to look at and.
Well, I think the other thing it's gonna do is it's gonna identify those, the global list of those issues that need to be addressed. And then you can do some prioritization of what, and when you look at prioritization, you look at comprehensive plan recommendations, you look at, development trends and, solar and battery energy storage system, which we'll be talking about tonight. Those are the things that are hitting a lot of towns right now. So those could be prioritized.
And then accessory apartments, are we keeping tabs on those every year, or
Yes.
just, like, have we seen, or monthly as well? Like, are
Well,
we
we see
seeing
we see four so far this year.
Yeah,
Which is more than
And,
we have.
It'd
and
be-
those may be the first four. I
Oh,
don't
okay.
remember seeing, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't remember seeing them on the
Yeah.
report before.
it'd be interesting to keep up tabs on that.
Yeah,
Um,
they are, the
yeah.
code officer is gonna do that.
And he runs a total for homes, so he'd probably run a total for accessory
There have been
units.
no duplexes built this year so far.
Yeah, so the red flag is 45 new building permits, right?
45 new housing starts, basically.
And the accessory dwelling does not fall under new
No,
housing, right?
no, it does not.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if that's something that we should pay attention to, because the 45 comes from rural character, make sure that we don't
Yep.
get too big too fast. I'm not sure whether or not the accessory dwelling unit building permits are something that we should pay attention to in regards to that.
Mm.
I don't think we've considered that before.
No, we haven't.
But you're not even close at this point.
Right.
And we
Yeah,
haven't
so-
really been, in the 4 years I've been watching it, that doesn't mean it won't get back to it again, but
Right.
I think the highest was 31 maybe.
Yeah. About 30.
Yeah, it's just a little bit above 30, but I think that's a good point. I mean, because the challenge is, what kind of accessory unit? You know, is it just somebody converting the second floor for grandma versus building a mini home for whomever? So,
Right.
I think it's a good point, though. And I think, and if I'm not, I will, when I get those, I'll keep forwarding them to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So, I usually get them, so I should be getting, I would guess, just about any day now. Okay, George, I guess the other one, we talked about the vision. I think, anybody else have anything else for, timing on codification? When do you, crystal ball, big guess?
As I said, it all depends on how it goes, but they did say there's a chance that we could have this first overhaul in for the April 2025 town meeting, so we'll see.
And they and we recognize that means it pretty much has to be done in October? Because we're gonna want to run it past the town.
Well, again, all you're doing is just doing the codification, you're not adopting new policies.
Right, so it's nothing we vote on.
Well, you would vote on it at town meeting.
So we do vote on
Right,
it, but it's really
yes.
not a, change
You're
in
not,
policy.
it's not like you're gonna go out and say, well, do you like the digital format or don't you like the digital format?
It's kind of like a,
Yeah, it's just basically,
So-
We would still think we need it by the end of the year.
oh, definitely,
Okay.
definitely by the
So,
end of the year.
It's not
Yeah.
something that's strange to
That's
them
right,
when we
and
get
we'll
to
be
the
able to
town.
tell, yeah. They've completed the first look at it in terms of proposing a reorganization. Now they're gonna start the legal review.
Okay.
So, but you talked about, mobile home parks earlier. Would they suggest that we change the ordinance to newer mobile home park
Probably
standards?
they will,
So
probably
then
they
would
will.
that raise, again, red flag, like is it,
Mhm.
if we're gonna change the ordinance to meet current standards, is that something that
Well,
would be,
what they're gonna say is that your current ordinance does not meet state legal requirements. And as the code officer, and I'm sure you folks would be advised by the town attorney, if your ordinance is in contradiction of state law, you have to follow the state law. So it's not like there's a policy option, do we wanna follow state law or not follow state law, you have to follow state law. So I think if you wanted to do something different in terms of mobile home park management within the limited scope of the law, then you might want to go deeper into it from a public input standpoint.
Similar to what
But
we did.
again, you've got one mobile home park in town. There's not really any applications for mobile home parks, so it's not a pressing need that you would want. And, you know, if you come into compliance with the state law, you can also always revisit the issue in the future, so.
Yeah, I think and that's something as we get into this and we discuss it, we'll just have to see what
Yeah,
they tell us we need to take a look at and what that means.
yeah, and if there are issues with it in terms of, we just feel we should hold off until next year and do more with it, then you can always do that. But we theoretically may be able to get this first, reorganization of it, reformatting of it done in time for the April 2025 town meeting. And then what that would do is whatever amendments you do adopt, that's gonna be the standard process now. Once you adopt your amendments at town meeting, you send them to general code, they update everything and cross-reference everything. So most towns now have this automatic process to do that. And they'll also be posting on the digital format and platform. They'll be publishing what draft amendments are there for public review.
so it's kind of like a contract we have with this company
Yeah.
over time.
Yep.
Nice.
yeah, and I think we talked about it before, I think we're gonna learn from this codification process, what we need to focus on in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not today, but.
Yep.
And then it comes down to how much we can bite off at one time, 3 or 4 changes seem to be our sweet spot, or maybe even our max that we can do as a town. So, that's just something we need to consider. So anything else on town officials? If not, I don't see that we have any public, I don't, either resident or non-resident. The next one is continuing business, we have none. New business, the completeness review of preliminary plan application for proposed phase 2 of Bowie Hill subdivision, map 10, lot 38. Public comment will not be taken. So I think they've asked to be extended to our September 4th meeting, and it would take a vote by us to do that, so do
So
I have?
moved.
What's that?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Moved and seconded, any further discussion?
Yeah, can we, just a quick discussion of, they pushed it out, right?
They
Like,
did
we-
request to be
This is their
tabled.
Yeah,
request.
we asked for additional info, and then they,
When they saw the staff report in terms of the draft incomplete letter, they just said, why not just hold off for another month?
okay, yeah.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, if you approve pushing it out, raise a hand. I see 5-0, and it's unanimous. The next things on the other business are some of the land use changes that are being worked on by the town. The 3 that George has listed here are battery storage, resource protection, and historic preservation. And battery storage is kind of one that we've taken on, so I'd like to spend some time going through that and some of the options. And then the other 2, resource protection and historic preservation, that's really more just for your info, what's going on with that. So it's really not, we're not at the point, they haven't brought anything to us. That is, Alan, Juliet, and I are on the resource protection thing along with members of the Conservation Commission. George has done a lot of great work on different options, so if you get a chance, you need to look at it in color, but I think the slides are all there for people to look at the different options. 250, so on and so forth, but he shows in his, correct me if I'm wrong, there's the pictures that show what happens to this land if it's 100 feet off from the house, that's exempted if it's 250 feet off, or if you go with a state, a recent change to the state map, which eliminates bigger chunks of land. So again, the resource protection is looking at that in more detail, but if you want to kind of compare some of the changes. and
Where
what
is
happens.
that? Where can we see that?
Well, I gave in the packet, the overview of the 3 options. I don't know if we wanna wait until we get to that, of the second item, and deal with battery energy first, and we can talk about the details of that.
Also, I wonder if we should wait and maybe discuss this more next meeting after we talk
That's sort
with
of my
the
thought, is it
Okay,
might-
sure.
board.
But I think in the interim though, if Brian
Yep.
and Mark want to look at it,
Yes.
where can they get to it?
Okay, so what I've done is I've prepared the summary in the planning board packet.
I see
which
the
basically-
summary,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that tells what the 3 options are, and then it shows the map of the town with what the town-wide comparison of the impact on the resource protection district of those 3 different options. And then I gave 2 examples of a detailed comparison between the option 1, which is gray, beginning with habitat, developed areas being removed from resource protection, and then there's a 250-foot buffer and a 100-foot buffer around existing buildings that John mentioned. So I just gave 2 examples. I've identified about 50 buildings in resource protection that are now non-conforming uses and can't be expanded without going to the boards. And the beginning with Habitat 6+, which the state has recalibrated that whole evaluation. That will pull about 18 of those buildings out of resource protection, leaving 30-something additional ones. And so we're looking at options for giving relief to those property owners. So I don't know if you want to look at this point at all, because we haven't, the committee working group has not really decided what direction to go. So I don't know if you want to wait until,
No, I think I would like to wait, because I think it's
Yeah.
fair for both this and historic to let them kind of do their
yeah,
work.
so what I was referring to is for Mark and Brian to wait and just, you could just see what we're doing, but to look in the details, you might want to wait.
Okay,
And George, aren't you, you're having a presentation to the select board on the 13th, correct?
Yeah, just the same update. Here are the three options. And the other thing the working group has asked is they've asked for select board direction, because one of the three options goes beyond what they had originally targeted, giving relief to landowners with existing buildings. The starting place for doing that is, in my estimation, the beginning with Habitat Developed Areas map as an objective, comprehensive planned basis for determining how you define or identify developed portions of lots. So we started there as the basis for identifying, because remember last year we tried to do this and there was some concern over, well, what is the developed area of a lot? Is it 20 acres of field, or is it just the yard around the house?
And we took it a formal vote and
Yeah,
that
so,
lost.
yeah, so I went back to the drawing board to find an objective basis, and I couldn't find a better one than the comprehensive plan, so that's some of the working group members were concerned that using that as an option to present to the public went beyond the scope of the mission assigned by the select board, which was to do two things: deal with the inaccurate beginning with Habitat 6+ data. We've done that. And the second one was to give relief to homeowners who had their buildings put in resource protection, making it much more difficult for them to do expansions of their homes. So the idea of including option one, which is to take all areas identified by beginning with Habitat out of resource protection, the majority of the working group felt that that was going beyond the mandate and wanted to get the select board to endorse that before it went any further.
To define what they're looking for. So that's resource protection, as long as we're doing it. Historic preservation, I think, is the Historic Preservation Committee has been working on stuff. They are working with the select board as well, with George and the select board, so more to follow on that. And George put some information in there on them, but again, I think it's premature for us to get into a detailed discussion on what they're doing until they have some, to be fair to everybody, is they've got something to present. We don't waste our time talking about things that may never be.
And I gotta say, I like, George, how you presented the info in here, kind of like what your thoughts are and then what the commission's thoughts are.
The select board and town manager asked me to give a comparison.
Yeah.
I don't see a map. You talked about it. I don't see a map that's part of the.
Did you bring
package.
up the links for that item, that
This
agenda
is
item?
just the agenda that I got from you all.
Did you get the
Did
agenda
you get the
through?
packet?
There's another 200 pages.
It's, I found this the
171.
easiest if you just go to our
Yeah,
website.
go to the website.
Go to the
You-
Go to the
you need to
website.
look at it,
Go
color
to the
it.
agenda,
Mhm.
Yeah,
just hit the link.
sometimes it doesn't link if you go the other way.
So that covers those two
If
things.
you have trouble, let me know.
And then getting back to, and then I guess one other question, George, we haven't, it's not on the list. Is the solar, or the Conservation Commission working on solar? I don't know that I've
They
got.
are, I
Okay.
believe they are. I've not been involved in that, other than giving them some requested GIS layers for their analysis. And I understand that they're looking at coming up with some criteria for identifying optimum locations for solar farms, and areas where solar farms should be discouraged. And they're looking obviously at the power lines, and they're looking at gravel pits as potential optimum sites. So that's the kind of analysis that they're doing. They're also looking at agricultural lands as being particularly of concern, that those don't end up all as solar farms. So that's the type of research they're doing. As I said, I have not been directly involved in that.
Okay. And all of those, like last year with solar, they'll put it together, they'll hold the public information resource protection workshop, will hold the public information meeting, something will go, they'll send something to the select board, who will then say, this is what we want, send it back to us as the planning board to hold a formal public hearing on any and all that they want to see on the warrant, and which I think brings us into battery energy storage systems, which is kind of the planning board's, that's definitely in our ballpark, whatever sports analogy you'd like to use. So George, you want to kind of, you've done some work on moratorium, and I think where we left it last meeting, we tended to be considering either a ban or a moratorium to give us more time to work out the details. So George has done some good research on the how to do either of those legally.
And just because I wasn't here last meeting, I see there was 4 options, I think, right? Or 3, yeah, 4, that you discussed: the de facto prohibition, express prohibition, draft regulations to address safety, and then a temporary moratorium. So did you all discuss those? And then was the board in favor? How were you thinking? Were some for prohibition and some for temp moratorium?
I think that's a good summary.
good
And
summary?
based
Okay.
upon then what George would find, and then those who were here jump in and correct me, but if we decide as a board that going the ban is what we want to do, we'd work with the attorney and we'll come up with the right language for the ban. The other one is, at least I personally feel that given all the unknowns or concerns about battery storage, we can't get there from here between now and the town meeting.
Right.
To have really detailed, the good safety rules. You know, solar, in my opinion, was relatively easy because it's almost ancient technology. I mean, there's enough out there on solar farms and decommissioning and all the other stuff. Battery storage is still, I think, extremely new. So I think what we thought, and again, if I'm wrong, buy us some time to really dig into, if we decide that, hey, we want to look seriously at having it in Durham versus just banning it, we need time to write the right rules for it.
And I appreciate that. what I'm wondering is why those two are completely opposite from each other. One is prohibition is prohibition, like
Yep.
there's none. Like, how can we say that right now? Versus the other one, which is a temporary moratorium, which completely makes sense. We do not have time before the meeting, but why even have that prohibition on the table when we don't even have time to, like, how can?
If I recall, our discussion was about where our location is and how viable it really would actually be.
What do you mean, for storage?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, as the one who was pushing the prohibition,
yeah.
my thought was for a whole list of reasons: rural character, safety, water supply. For those reasons, I didn't think that was the right thing to put into Durham.
Right, but storage, I mean, one great example of why we're not even there, they don't even need water. They're saying not to use water on these storage systems, so the water supply is not as important as we might think it is. So during the moratorium, we can decide, let's prohibit these things.
Yeah, that could.
But saying right now that we want to prohibit this type of renewable energy, that, I mean, it might not work here, but it could work. Like, these sites aren't huge. These sites don't have to be the Gorham thing. They can be small, compact, that you can't even see. Like, and a farmer or a landowner might want it. Or like CMP, we have so many corridors. Like, I don't know, the prohibition right now, like.
Well, I think if we really look at what George has presented to us, the first item there is the statutory authority for a moratorium, and I think we should review that, because that will give us time to investigate this further.
And then at the end, during that, if we decide we do want to prohibit them, absolutely, we come to that decision. But saying we're going to prohibit right now,
There was no vote on that.
No. I think remembering my thought was we could present both to the town. Because I don't think there's any way between now and the first Saturday in April, we can get to a good set of standards.
no.
And so that option kind of went by the wayside. But between now and April of 2026, if that's what we elect to do, we could. Or do we, some towns have just started banning it, and I guess we need, that's part of the discussion tonight, is what do we want to do?
So the moratorium could be, sorry, I wasn't here, guys, last time, but
That's okay.
what's the length of time we have for that?
You'd have six months initially at town meeting vote. The select board could extend it for another 6 months. And I think Juliet is really raising a good point, because if you just go with the moratorium route, it's gonna simplify your process of public input, and you could end up at the place of a prohibition. And it doesn't have to be a blanket prohibition of all battery energy storage. It could be just the large scale that are end up being prohibited. So the moratorium will give you, it'll stop it for at least a year. And then at the end of the year, you'll have the language for the prohibition or partial prohibition.
And so does the 6 months start at town meeting?
Yes.
So
Yes.
we would, right now, kind of keep going, researching, and then, decide on that.
Well, what would happen if you go with just keep it simple in terms of just go with the moratorium, which is a de facto prohibition until for at least a year. And so what you could do is focus on the legal requirements for doing a moratorium and explain to the public, what the goals of the moratorium are. So you could really focus on the moratorium rather than trying to get to the issue of should these things be prohibited. I think Juliet raises a good point that this study that you do could give you the basis for saying why it should be prohibited, including all the public concerns for rural character and everything else. And then your prohibition would be much sounder when you do it.
So if that's the way we want to go, we're talking about 17 months. I gotta do the count off my figures. So September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, that's 8.
Plus
So it's
a
about
year.
20 months,
Plus
plus
a-
a year. So
28,
from now,
right.
and then the way I read this, the stuff that was well done by George, is by taking some kind of action, or starting the process, whether we vote on it or not, that then lets it go retroactive to a certain date. So that it's not like we have to rush. I don't think we have anybody before us anyway, but we don't necessarily have to rush to get something done before the April town meeting.
Right.
So we have about 20 months to say, okay, we really want to have the town, we want to have a moratorium. We can start working on getting the information about these things. And then, if the town approves the moratorium, we then, keep digging into it about all the issues, it pros and cons, and decide what we want to do, make a recommendation for April 2026. Is that kind of the gist of, I've said my piece. What is the other board members, what are you thinking?
Well, my thinking is that we should direct George to facilitate the sample moratorium ordinance. Period. It's presented to us, and by reading through it, then it will allow us to go through this process and to bring data forward and not to bring the fear factor. Well, there may be a fear factor with the data.
You're not calling me a coward, though, are you?
Can you explain?
No, I don't want anybody, I don't think that it is appropriate for this board to basically say, we're gonna ban it,
Okay.
period.
No, and I don't think that was ever on the
Without-
table.
Without
though.
justification.
I don't think that was ever on the table.
No,
The way I
but
recall
there-
our
there are
discussion last
people-
time was to have public input.
There are people that when we were talking solar arrays, we shouldn't have them in town anyway.
Great. But that's the process. I
Right,
think
right.
what we talked about, last time was, we would present, do you want to do them at all? I'm talking about this fall. And then, or do you want to take the, whatever, last 15, 16 months and figure out if we can make it work, and if that's what we want to do. And if not, after that time period, we can ban it then. That was what it was. It wasn't, we don't get a say. We're not, as a board, we don't get to say, we're not gonna do
That's
this.
correct.
It's gotta go to the town. So the question was, do we present two options? A ban and or a moratorium?
I don't think, as of right now, don't think that we have information to even be
Exactly.
presenting a ban.
Exactly, we would be, what we would be doing if we asked that question right now is people that don't want them would say no, people that are interested would say yes. We wouldn't have any data backup at all to explain one or the other, right? Like, that's what I'm saying, like, just give us some time to look into it, that 20 months. We may come to the end where we are pushing, like, yeah, we don't want these things here.
Correct.
Right? But, like, right now is just so premature, I think.
Your thoughts?
I mean, yeah, I agree that we need the research. I think at this point, we don't have hardly any information on these things, other than some of the scary stuff we've seen from New York, but
And we're not the only town. A lot of towns in Maine are going through this. Like, I'm talking with some of my coworkers, and like, they're in the same exact boat, like looking for help, looking for resources, and they're just not, they don't have it either. So, we're not alone. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's enough, that's okay. Your thoughts?
Yeah, this came across our table, and the select board said, you guys look into it, and we've done squat, so yeah, we need to do a lot more research, for sure.
Gotcha.
It's a good point. Should we bring it up on the 13th to the select board? and
No,
just-
I'm
No? Okay.
kind of over, I think at this point, particularly, we're not gonna make a recommendation one way or another. If we're just gonna ask them for more time,
Well, we're gonna ask, our recommendation is a moratorium.
if that's what we wanna do.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, if we're asking for
That's
more
what-
time, I don't think we need to
I didn't
go
know,
to the
maybe
select
we
board.
don't, maybe
Yeah.
we don't, maybe we don't. I just wasn't sure.
Yeah, I think you wanna really frame it a little bit better, what you mean by moratorium.
Okay. And
And we should discuss that now.
Yeah,
If
I
we
know.
wanna go in that direction.
could you explain the difference between, you mentioned the moratorium is kind of like a de facto prohibition versus the temporary moratorium.
Okay, so option one, we kind of eliminated last time, was to get legal input on whether or not, just under the adopted conditional use criteria, you could deny one of these things if it came in. Just using the conditional use criteria, scale, intensity of use, those sorts of generalized. And I think the answer would be, depending on what the proposal was, yes, but the difficulty with that is that some of these proposals are being built by multinational corporations that have lots of resources in terms of experts and legal teams. And so the town would be at a great disadvantage to try to build a case that something couldn't be approved because of the concerns for fire safety, when they bring in 5 experts that testify that these things are perfectly safe.
Yeah.
We have redundant safety precautions. We have all of this technology. We will provide whatever the town needs. If it just would be more difficult to defend your position if you don't have any specific standards. So that's not an optimal approach to this. It's-
And we don't want to set that, like, expectation either, right? Like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, and that's part of the difficulty, is you're basically declaring your bias before they even come in.
Yeah,
By saying, we're gonna use our conditional use
Right.
criteria as a de facto prohibition. That's on the public record.
okay, so
right
that's
now.
what that is, got it.
Yeah, that's what that was.
Well, I mean, that was as a possibility. I mean, it could be, as Juliet said, they come in and wow us with a whole bunch of, if you're using number one option, say, look at it is safe, we're using this, there was something iron air that came up in the Portland paper today that's supposed to be a lot safer than lithium batteries. So if they came in and said, here's our track record as a company, you may very well just say, look at, I can't justify saying no on this one,
Yeah.
on a conditional use. So, okay.
But it is, when we look through the material that George has presented to us, one of the issues here, it specifically spells out statutory requirements to enact a moratorium. And if you read that, there are a couple bullet points here, and one of them that really catches my eye, one of it says, the first one says to prevent a shortage of overburdening of public facilities, whether it be sewer, water, roads. But the second one that really caught my eye is because existing plans, ordinances, or regulations, if any, are inadequate to prevent serious public harm. So based on the state statutes, that right there would provide us a starting point to establish the moratorium.
Yeah, I agree. Any other comments?
Is that what you're thinking too?
Well, yeah, and clearly, as Alan just pointed out, this issue meets the criteria for a moratorium, but that would not be an adequate basis to prohibit them.
No, that's.
So-
Right, it's a
that's right.
moratorium.
It's a moratorium, then we
That's
do,
right.
right,
Two separate things.
Yep.
Yeah, sure.
then we do further investigation.
So as I'm thinking through this in general, we would propose a moratorium. We would take that to the town for information this fall and say, hey, we're gonna do this because, you know, that second bullet, because we don't think we're there with enough information. And then we'll take, and then coming out, and we'll start, but the next meeting, we will start working, and we can start then, before then, we can start digging into, hey, New York, this is their, they have these rules that we ought to consider. Gorham, I hopefully have sent that to you, if not, I will, the Gorham conditional use approval for their big operation there had some good rules, ideas in it, you know, like which NFP, the National Fire Protection thing to use. And there were a whole bunch of them, which is a start, and then George has done a lot of great research, and Juliet's brought stuff to us, and then we just say, okay, which of these things do we want to do it? Work with the fire chief is a big player in
That's a big
that.
one.
Road commissioner is, I think, a big one too, in terms of where is, you know, what kind of rules do we want to put on, where is it gonna go? And then, just as the conservation folks are doing with solar farms, where don't we want them? So is there a place that is potentially environmentally sensitive, because if it melts down, it's gonna leak into Runaround Pond, or, you know, is there some places that we, as we're looking at this, that we start off now saying these are areas that we're not gonna let it go because they're environmentally sensitive? But those are kind of details that we then spend the next amount of time, so.
Yeah.
So, step one, I mean, it doesn't seem to be a lot of work, George, except maybe have, because these things can be legally controversial, to have our new attorney kind of draft something up, or MMA, or somebody draft something up and says, this moratorium passed by the town, at a town meeting, will suffice, you know, against any argument that you acted arbitrarily, or whatever the legal pain is to that. Does that make sense?
Couple notes. One is, like I said, Maine is, we've got these, I don't know if they're laws yet, but things are driving storage in the state, but yet people are not ready for it. It's just like solar, similar. Solar's a little past, but I would really defer to, New York is doing a lot of good work with storage. Like they've got a fire group that's studying storage. They've got local codes, draft policy codes that are really good to look at. So that's one state that's somewhat nearby that's doing a lot. Vermont is also doing quite a bit. So I would lean on those states. Unfortunately, Maine, we don't really have any area except for Gorham, which is not like Durham at
Yeah.
all.
No, they
right?
put theirs
Like-
in an industrial park right next to a
Yes.
major power plant. So we
Yes.
don't have
Right.
anything that even
We don't
comes
have-
close to that. The new one, I don't know if you've all been able to open it, but the one up in Lincoln is going on an old paper mill. So those are different worlds than Durham, you know, they're not really worried about rural character on top of an old, paper mill or Rumford that put it next to a gas-fired power plant and a dam. So, I mean, that's something, as we're going through this and we're getting feedback from people that, you know, what does this do? And I would encourage anybody who's going past Rumford, the good news is in the 20th of August, Mexico will no longer have a police force, so you can fly through Mexico.
But my last piece on that is New York and Vermont, they are looking at rural towns. So they're not just focused on the Gorhams.
Yes.
So there's some examples there. The other thing, you did mention a developer that was interested. If that comes up, are we kind of safe in that,
Okay, so let's talk about the moratorium in terms of the process. So, as John suggested, what we would do, and interestingly enough, MMA had all of these fact sheets on different aspects of a moratorium. And they gave as two examples, one of those was Durham. Apparently back in the 1990s, the town adopted a moratorium, the town of Durham. And so they use that as an example of doing a moratorium. So that's pretty good. We can use that as the template. I will make sure I have the right project when I do it. I apologize for that.
No, that was good, that was good.
Right here even?
You've disappointed me with that cheap shot, George.
No, that was a bazinga.
That was.
It's fair.
But before we get any deeper, usually I'm the one who's saying stupid stuff, George. Not that that was stupid, but.
I resemble that remark.
it was levity.
Okay, get back to business here. So basically, we would draft something, I would draft something, and then run it by MMA and or the town attorney to make sure. But it's pretty clear, if MMA's using that as the template, it probably covers the bases. So all we would need to do is fill in the current information with this specific land use that we're discussing. So in terms of the goals of the moratorium, because that's part of it, what will you do during this moratorium period? Conceptually, what I'm envisioning is that you would spend the first 6 months of the allowable moratorium time frame to really research these battery energy storage systems. What are the issues? And you wouldn't necessarily look at it from the standpoint of this is something that the town would never consider because of rural character, fire safety, or anything else. I think you would want to take an objective viewpoint of looking at these things. What are the costs and benefits? So, for example, the town has some concern about the tax base and the limitations for economic development to address tax base. And so you could look at what are the economic benefits of these. If they were tax exempt, that's one matter, but if they are all taxable real estate and they're in the millions of dollars, then that could be a substantial benefit to the town. And then you would balance that out with, well, what are the costs to the town in terms of rural character, in terms of safety, in terms of burden on public services. So one of the things you see in these studies being done by states like New York is you see that, you know, it's one thing to have the NFPA standard this, that, and the other. It's another thing to have the personnel available to confirm that it meets those as a peer review stage, but also, once it's up and running, you have the emergency response capabilities. So you certainly don't want rural volunteer firefighters going into an industrial accident type situation without proper training or equipment. And so those would be the types of things you'd look at conceptually during phase 1 of the moratorium. And then at that point, those results of that analysis could be presented to the select board, and the select board could then say, okay, let's go ahead and continue the moratorium and set a direction for drafting of whatever the town policy is going to be, either prohibiting them, limiting them to certain types that are within the capacity and character of Durham. So I would envision it as a kind of a two-step process, with the first step being evaluation of the issue, the opportunities and the challenges of this technology and land use, and then the second phase being, let's put together a plan for how we're going to do it, if we're going to do it.
So we kind of, I think we talked about this last meeting, getting back to the taxes part of it. We would not talk about or try to decipher what needs to happen with taxes. So we
Well-
would have some help, or we need help from
Yeah, and I
an
think
assessor
one of the
or-
issues will be, who's gonna lead this effort? Is it gonna be the planning board? Is it gonna be a special ad hoc committee? Are you gonna hire a consultant to do this? Because that's what many communities do, especially with something of this technical nature. And part of the concern that I would have and advise you of is that in looking at New York, their Most of this is being driven by the industry, because they want to see this work, they want to see it, but they have that bias of, you know, if there's a safety problem, they can say, well, we have all the safeguards involved, but then that depends on the people who are operating it,
Yes.
and it depends on the regulators, do they have the capacity to deal with, you
The
know,
town, yeah.
enforcement and inspections and all of those things. So, there is a bias there in the industry wanting it to work. And I just think you need to look at that. Pretty much everything I've looked at was industry driven, or government policy, alternative energy policies driven, which are moving in the same direction of, there may be problems, but we'll overcome them. That's the concern I have with most of the research. So if the town were to hire its own independent consultant, it would be representing your interests rather than the interest of the energy industry or the government alternative energy industry. So those are just some things to think about. Who's gonna do this? Does the
Yeah.
planning board or anybody else in this town have the expertise, the time, the resources to do this right? Or should the town consider hiring a consultant and then, you know, getting that report done by a professionally qualified consultant?
And I think to the latter half of that question, at least, if we're gonna go with a moratorium and do the research, and we're gonna hire a consultant, that is, maybe it's two different votes, but that's a vote at the town meeting. Because if, there's no money to hire somebody, so it would be part of the town's budget, and the town's approval for that budget. So we
Yeah.
could do some of the preliminary research, which is
Yeah.
already started, and start getting into that a little bit, but if we decide to go to the town, the select board, we go to the select board with, we'd like to have a moratorium. And
Yeah.
for 6 months, and this is the phasing, I like the phasing you put out there. If we don't feel like the planning board or anybody in the town is the right people to do that, has the right technical expertise, oh, by the way, we're gonna want 10,000, 30,000, whatever the budget is to hire somebody to do this for us. And so that's, you know, that's one vote, two votes at the town, to say, okay,
And I would suggest that you do the moratorium ballot question, warrant question. And then if you get the resources to do it, you can do a better job. If you don't get the resources, you can still do a job. It won't be as
Yeah.
solid, it won't be as convincing, it may
Yeah.
be limited, because one of the things you might wanna do is a fiscal impact analysis to say, this is one of the things that I learned many, many years ago, when they started doing fiscal impact analysis. And you've probably heard, you know, the analysis, residential always costs the town money, open space pays, all of those kind of generic impressions that people have. But we did a study of, because Falmouth was updating its comprehensive plan like back in the 1992 recession. And so obviously everybody was thinking economic development because you're in a recession after building boom and bust. And, you know, we hired a consultant, Planning Decisions, to do a fiscal impact analysis. And what they found was that the communities that had the highest rates of tax increases were Freeport and Scarborough. And you'd think, wait a minute, they're getting all of that economic development, all of the commercial, the industrial, why, how come their taxes are going up faster? And what they found was that the school funding formula is that when you increase your commercial tax base, you can, the state says, well, they've got a lot more money now, they don't need as much from us, and so they cut school subsidies and state revenue sharing, which then led to all of the TIF, tax increment financing proposals. And then you think, okay, well, we can TIF it, and that way the state won't take that money. It won't keep that money that they usually give us. But then the problem is with TIF is that when you create a tax increment financing district, whatever taxes you shield from, or tax base you shield from the state, has to be dedicated to the TIF district. So it cannot be used for other purposes. You usually use that to pay for the infrastructure, which 20 years later, 30 years later, after those improvements are paid off, then it has the long-term tax benefit, but not the short-term tax benefit. So that type
that's
of fiscal
complicated.
impact analysis could be part of this, you know, would a $10 million battery storage system placed in Durham be great for the taxes? Well, maybe yes, maybe no.
Yeah,
And
You'd
you
have to
want to
make-
include that in this analysis.
You'd have to
Yeah.
make sure that in no way, shape, or form does it ever go to a nonprofit status,
Yeah,
which is hard to do. But if somebody says, oh, you know, we're a nonprofit, we've given this to
Right.
the Harbor
Yeah.
Seals of Camden.
well, more likely what you end up with, you might have a state institution or a educational, those are the types of big impact uses that are tax exempt. It wouldn't be necessarily need to be a not-for-profit, it could be just tax exempt. I'm not sure
Thank you.
exactly with the utilities, where that line starts and stops, but that's just something you would, again, that's all part of a fiscal impact analysis. And the question is, should this moratorium, if you want to find out reasons why the town would want it, should that be part of it? And then that argues for a consultant with expertise to be able to do that kind of analysis, along with the safety, the technology, and all of those other things. It's a big deal.
So I think what we're saying is that going forward in the near term, we work on the moratorium language.
Yep.
We start doing some more research. Again, we've already got some going. But what we take to the town in information meetings and in the town meeting is, here's the moratorium, and here's what it means, and here's, you know, what we're gonna do over the next 12 months that are left by the time we get to April.
Yep.
To get there. So when we may come to you with it, don't do this. We may come to you with, do it, but do this. And oh, by the way, this is what we'd like to pay to do that. And I think you gotta be upfront with that. This is what we're gonna ask you to pay to do that.
Yeah, so I think just conceptually going into a public participation process on this moratorium, what you might be able to do through the public participation process is kind of identify what would the town support in terms of a study? You know, would it want to see a fiscal impact analysis to see if it could be a tax benefit to the town? Obviously, you'd want to see the safety aspects. And, you know, there's also a component of the constituency of the town that's very much pro alternative energy. So you could kind of gauge public input on, you know, are all of those equal in terms of public support? Or are some priorities over others and some people don't really care about or aren't interested in? So that could be your public participation process, would be to try to refine the basis and the goals of the moratorium.
So those 15 people who come to the public information meetings, and the 109 who come to the town.
But they all represent a lot of people in the community.
so what if we, like, plan on the moratorium starting in April, but from now till then, we reach out with like an advert, you know, like, hey, we want to get to a BESS group together. We're looking for engineers, we're looking for people in the space, we're looking for really anyone that's interested too, right? Because we do want that other side as well, but like form a working group.
Yeah, if
unless,
you had that all ready to roll right after the town meeting, that would be.
well, no,
very
I'm
good.
talking earlier than
Okay.
that, like, so
No,
we're.
but what I'm saying is you get that groundwork of-
Yes.
of organization done,
Yes.
so that when the town meeting approves it, you're ready to roll.
But what do you all think about that? Instead of, unless we all want to work on this as a planning board, along with everything else we're doing, this is going to be a lot. And I feel like we're all really smart people, but I would love to see who else, 'cause I think we have some people in town that might be able to help.
They could be totally involved with this in their professional career.
Yeah, I'm thinking
And
engineers.
who those people may, it is amazing me, the talent that is here in this town, that
Yeah.
we just have to tap into it, but how do we do that?
And we all could be part of it as well if you wanted, but it would be an outside thing. It wouldn't be a planning board.
It'd be more than you could handle with everything
I-
else going.
Yeah,
Just need to keep it on track. I mean, in terms
Yeah.
of timing and stuff.
kind of like solid waste.
What's that?
And that's right on track.
Or the downtown vision. I'm okay with that, I think, but I don't know why you couldn't, if you got that together in, say, September, since it's, you know, close to the middle of August, where they would start, but they would start, say, hey, look, this may go nowhere, but we'd like to have you start taking the New York stuff and the
Yeah.
Vermont stuff and the
Yeah.
Gorham stuff and so on and so forth, and the industry stuff, and start putting that, together.
Educating yourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so that you can start, I mean, there's a lot to do it, but I think you find some ordinances that you like and you just start cutting and pasting, you know, or whatever they are, ordinances or draft ordinances or whatever. So I'm fine with that and,
But I also like your idea of kind of getting a cost together for a consultant, like to see
Yeah.
what that would be.
if we wanna go the
Because-
consultant thing, we're gonna, in sooner rather, cause the town's gonna put their budget together starting in like December. And so
Well-
anybody got a swag of what we're talking about? If it's $5,000, it's one thing, if it's
It
30,000.
yeah, it depends. It's probably gonna be more, like.
Yeah, what I would do is I would start contacting some planning firms. There's one at Pineland that's doing a lot of planning. And so I would talk to them about this type of a study.
Yes.
And
Is that something you?
Yeah, I would get in touch with them.
the fiscal
just to-
impact study. is what
Well,
you're
the overall
No, just-
study of, the moratorium goals and what we're looking to do, and just kind of see what their thoughts would be. And, if they're not able to do it from a capacity standpoint or an expertise, then who do they know? That
I could
be-
probably give you some names too.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
you have to get an estimate, just a
Yeah, just
ballpark
a-
estimate.
Yeah, I
What-
mean,
what are we studying?
And then
What other studies have been done?
Yeah, I would
And
think
in
even if
maintenance.
they're not interested or don't have the capacity, they could give you a rough ballpark as to what you're looking
Potentially.
for,
Yeah.
for costs, and I think, that's
And again,
probably the
if you
first thing to
get,
look
if you get a
at.
certain amount
because-
and it costs more, you can do what you can with what you got.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
But at least you'd
exactly.
have something to work with.
Yeah, and we can see what the town thinks about that.
Yeah, and you're
Right.
assuming that there are folks in town that, even though they have the professional capacity, they
Yeah.
might not wanna be interested in.
Well,
Yeah.
that and it's gonna be a lot of work, but also really no one is doing this in Maine. Like, it's not, it's something that people are talking about, but it's not, it's hard to find people in Maine that are putting a storage
I can't
battery.
remember if Gorham,
They
Somewhere.
I was just
have the
thinking,
expertise to even
Yeah,
evaluate one.
I think the engineers can help. There's, fire.
The other thought I had was this, we've kind of started this as a new process, the idea of a fall public participation process. And I think if you're looking for people that
Yeah.
might be qualified and interested,
Yeah,
if you advertise you're gonna be doing a public information
Yeah,
meeting
that's
on
good.
battery energy storage systems, you might get them right there.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, I think that's a good,
so you're talking about what you're saying is kind of say, hey, we'd like to come in and talk about battery energy storage, not to have something to present them.
No, what I'm talking about is announcing that you're gonna be considering working on a moratorium. And then here are the issues, why the planning board is considering this, and just put out some of the information, summary of the information that we've come up with. And then put that on the town website, get it out on the news flash and everywhere else, say on whatever the date's gonna be, you're gonna have a public information meeting on battery energy storage systems. People might come to find out about it, pros, cons, otherwise, and from that pool, that input, you might identify some people.
but I also think we could be more proactive and be like, we're looking for people to be on this in that in that advertisement.
Sure.
Because I think
so-
what you don't want to get with announcing a search is just somebody who is either very say, I really like this idea, or I'm really against this idea, but I don't have a clue what I'm talking about. That's what you don't want, is somebody who
Yeah, and that's the
volunteers to be.
screening process that the select board should go through when
Yeah,
appointing people.
appointing people to the
Yeah,
commission or
To
whatever
make sure
it's
that,
gonna be.
Yeah.
looking for people with experience or knowledge in
Right,
energy systems,
Yeah.
battery energy
Right.
And
storage.
that are objective.
yeah.
That's hard to quantify.
You can get a general qualitative sense. And one more aspect of this to consider is the retroactivity.
Mhm.
And so from what I read of the MMA materials, this could be retroactively applied, even as a moratorium. Obviously for many decades, the state of Maine has allowed retroactivity of ordinances. So that if someone, generally under Maine law in most states, if someone files a development application and you start a substantive review, it's like we have this completeness checklist, not substantive. Once you start your substantive review, they are basically grandfathered against any new regulations you might adopt as a community. So that's the general principle, it's been in effect for decades. But in recent years, the Maine legislature has supported retroactive ordinances under certain conditions. So, and now the MMA materials indicate that that also applies to moratoria. And one of the issues is the public announcement of you, whether you're adopting an ordinance or drafting an ordinance for consideration by the legislature or a moratorium, if people are on notice that this is in the works, then they can make a business decision of whether to invest in what they're doing or not, or to what level they're going to invest in it. And so the courts have recognized that if a town announces it's gonna be doing a moratorium, say for example, if you went to the select board Labor Day and proposed to the select board at a public meeting, it's on their agenda, it's on the website, that the select board will be considering planning board recommendation to propose a moratorium for consideration at the April 2025 town meeting, then that's now public record. So if there's some big company in California that's looking at property in Durham, and they're in negotiations on an easement or a lease or a purchase of the property, and they do that, once that public record is established and they don't do due diligence, they can't claim that we went in reliance on the ordinance, we spent all this money, the town's liable, you have to give us our permits, or whatever other claims they might try to make. So getting it on the public record, apparently according to the MMA information we looked at, would be important in terms of your ability to sustain a retroactive moratorium. Because between now and town meeting, you can't do anything from a standpoint of adopting either a moratorium or an ordinance.
Okay, so on that note, we should be, ready to talk about it, like, maybe next month? September, Labor Day? After
Well,
Labor Day, right, like
And it
announcing
wouldn't
it,
necessarily have to be
announcing
the
it.
proposal, you could just do a report to the select board indicating
That's
that
what I was
you've,
gonna ask.
over
Yeah.
the summer, you've looked at this issue and you think that the town, based on, the research that we've looked at, the MMA guidance on moratoria, we think that the planning board would like to pursue preparation of a moratorium warrant article for consideration. That's what we would like to put out to a public input process, and based on that public input process, then we would decide to go forward. So we just get it on the record now that the town is looking at this.
So we could do that in a letter or just show up at the select board meeting, their last one in August. I think next Tuesday's a little early, a little.
Yeah, I think we should look
Talk
at,
to
have
Joe.
your September meeting, and maybe I could draft a memo for you to consider, what you wanna say to the select board at this point, and then we can bat that around at the September meeting, and then if you make a motion at that meeting to send a report to the select board, with some of this information that we've collected, and indicate the planning board's intent to conduct a public participation process over the fall, and draft a moratorium for the April town meeting, then I think you'd cover that base of making it public.
Yeah, and maybe, note that we wanna start a committee or commission,
Recommend that the town.
Recommend.
Put 2 or 3 bullets together.
yeah.
So that would be our meeting is September 4th.
Mhm.
September 10th would be, I think, their first meeting. So we'd be shooting for September 10th.
Yep. And again, if you vote on this at the September meeting, that you're gonna do a report to the select board, and you've already started the public notification process.
Okay, well, we do, okay.
Mhm.
Thoughts?
Do we need to vote on that? No?
I think I like going to them sooner, because a moratorium is different than, here's the land use article with standards. That's, an odd duck, if you will, that may or may not draw attention. I mean, who knows if somebody's gonna show up next week and say, I beat you to your moratorium idea.
Why isn't this discussion?
Well, that's what I was gonna ask. Could we go, thank you, could we just go on the 27th of this month?
Should we make it as kind of formal as, you know?
I think you should. I think you should have a report that you all review, endorse, and make that formal request to the select board that they give endorsement to going forward with this.
So if we added this to the meeting minutes of tonight, couldn't that just count?
Well, I think we should have a motion that gives George that direction.
Asked me to prepare a report.
But maybe if it does come down to it, like someone comes in the next couple weeks, we could be like, well, actually, we did talk about it a couple weeks ago,
Well,
so.
Right, on July 10th, when you
Yeah,
look back it out.
I think it's
Right.
like when we had an appeal go to the Board of Appeals, people were trying to get their lot done, new resource protection came in, so the appeals board looked at
Yeah,
what actions had you taken at what specific times. So that's why I'm trying to say, let's do it formally, thoroughly, because if it ever does go to court, the better the record you have, as opposed to, oh, the planning board just discussed it as an idea at a meeting and then told the town planner to start working on it, so that's not solid in my mind.
Well, could we get us, and this may not be the most solid thing, but do we start the process and by some protection with Alan's comment, why don't we just have a motion right now, tonight, that says we will ask the select board for a moratorium. That's what in whatever the right term is there, and say, we discussed this as early as July 10th, look at our meetings, we had a vote. And then do the more formal thing on September 10th.
Oh, we really didn't, the July 10th, we basically had a lot of discussion about it.
I'm
And
sorry,
that-
I meant not tonight, I didn't mean July 10th.
Right, well, there was no vote on July 10th.
Yeah.
I think we should have a vote
Yes,
with
that's what he's
direction
saying.
tonight.
Tonight, yeah,
Yes.
I'm sorry, thank you.
Yes.
that's what I was saying too, is like, we
Yes.
have it in the record for today, but
Right.
formally, we'll do our
That's fine.
thing. I like that.
Can your vote reference July? Just to bring it back a little further?
Well, I think it's only an issue if they
I
come.
dreamed about it
They haven't come in.
If somebody files an application, nobody's filed an application.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I wanna be careful that, we don't say, well, we tried to do this just to prevent something.
Right.
What we're trying to do is say, we're not ready
Yeah,
for
yeah.
battery storage as of whatever tonight is, August, whatever. We decided we're going to seek a moratorium, and we'll provide the formal request to the select board on, what did I say it was, 10th, it was September 10th.
11th, yeah,
Yep.
Does that make sense?
yes.
So, I would make a motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, well,
Oh, were you gonna say what the motion is? Sorry, okay. What's your motion?
I would make a motion that I get paid more for buses. We have a second. Give me a second to think. I will make a motion that the planning board has decided that the way to go forward is a moratorium, and that as of today, and we will provide a formal request to the select board no later than September 10th, I think, whatever that day is, the first Tuesday, first Tuesday. That's
The
right, the
second
Tuesday,
Tuesday.
or so,
Just say the first select board meeting in September.
in September. Is that good enough, do we think?
Go ahead, Julia.
I'll second that.
We have a motion
I
and a
like it.
second.
It sounds great.
We'll let George finish
Who
writing.
seconded?
I do.
Julia.
Juliet. I'm just letting you finish writing it down, George, because it was so brilliantly phrased that I don't want to lose it.
Okay, so the motion is that the planning board will recommend a moratorium, and will ask the select board at the first select board meeting in September for formal endorsement of that proposal.
Do we want to say something about the planning board believes the best way forward is a moratorium? I mean, if that's good,
No.
that's good? That's good with everybody else?
I don't, Oh, yeah, it is at this point.
Okay.
I don't wanna have an outright ban at this point.
Yeah, that's fine. So, all those in favor of the motion that I made? I do want an all right ban, but I'll vote for this one. So now you guys have 20 months to convince me how
You
stupid I
will,
am.
you will listen to us, won't you?
I am 20 months, you got a chance to sell me. I think it passed unanimously.
Yep.
What else?
I wanted to talk about
Oh,
schedules.
I'm sorry, Juliet added something to the agenda.
Yeah, just to talk about schedules, I know I'm gonna be out, I believe our November meeting. I just wanted to make sure we'll have a quorum, right, for everything, so if folks are gonna be out anytime the next couple of months, maybe we should talk about that. I think I'm gonna be out November meeting. I know that's far out, but I just wanted to.
Doesn't hurt.
To-
Anybody else? So we need, obviously, the quorum is 3. If we only have 3, then anything that gets approved has to be unanimous, because our rule says it's the total 5. I think the best thing to do is have at least 4, so that, something doesn't die on a 2-to-1 vote, good, bad, or otherwise, or gets approved on a 2-to-1 vote when it shouldn't be.
Or maybe we could do this like via email. Everyone's really active on it. Like if you're gonna be out the following, maybe let folks know, and then we could plan on letting the alternates know if we need
Yeah,
more,
well, that.
someone to come.
I
We're
will
getting
add-
into the holiday season.
And I will
all
add
that.
something about the alternates too, but is that, I don't have any plans, so,
Okay.
the first Wednesday almost always works for me.
October is iffy for me. Might not be here for the October meeting.
Okay, is there anybody else that may miss October at this point?
No, I should
Okay,
be
so
here.
that would, not you guys, get a bunch of texts.
Are you gonna be out anytime soon?
No.
Okay, how about you?
So we have
I will be
4,
here.
and I could try to
You will
get
be
Tyler
here.
or,
Okay.
Ann, so that we got at least 4 for October.
I'll know more by the end of the month, but right now, it's not looking like I'll make it. But
Well, and if people have plans, we should always go with it. But I think, I guess, to go back just a step, in October for sure, I would expect we'll have, there may be more, we'll have Bowie Hill. Anyway, tentatively we have Bowie Hill. I think we'll have, Ruby Lane, Ruby Farms, whatever it may be. So we have those 2, subdivisions coming in.
Daycare site plan review.
Daycare site plan review. And so that's at least 3. It would be, it'd be nice if we get some of these first, done here, like the site plan review, if they're ready to go in September, which I don't know when they'll be ready to go. So September, we could probably count on those 3, or expect those 3. What'll be left in October, at least 2 of them probably of the 3. And then whatever else comes in afterwards. November, we should start whittling that down, but somebody again could come in with a big project. So October, probably 4. November, probably 4. I will ask Tyler and Ann. In fact, I've kind of been pushing this down the hill. As long as everybody's here, I'll throw this out. They both have been great, but I kind of think it's kind of like, you gotta start coming, commit to me now that you're gonna start making meetings, and if we need you, you're gonna be there. I mean, Ann always has, when we've gotten down to quorum or below, she has come, but I recognize it's difficult, but coming for a meeting and voting is difficult, because you gotta watch the movies and everything else, and so it's somewhat problematic if that's the best way to do it. So I will tell both of them, are they committed to doing this? And if they're watching, I don't mean to offend them, because they've been great participants in the past. And then if you know anybody else who's interested in stepping up to the plate as a alternate to the alternate, or just as an alternate, we can we could go with that, that too. So, I will try to keep filling stuff. So,
I like that idea. The alternate, excuse me, could sit at the table,
Yes.
right?
Oh,
And,
yeah,
and
definitely.
Yeah,
participate.
but
So
if-
I think that just that, right, having another person at this table with us.
I mean, absolutely,
You
both of
know?
those bring good ideas, they just,
Yeah.
you know, haven't
They're
been
not
here.
here.
They just can't vote. I mean, if there were,
Yes.
if there were three of us, we would move an alternate up. If there were four of us, we could decide if we wanted to bring an but by being here,
Yep.
as, you know, Mark was, stepped up and Tyler did before, if Bowie Hill comes up and you sit through the first phase, and when the second phase comes up, you can say, yeah, I was there, I heard what you all were saying, my questions got answered, I can vote yea or nay on this project because I'm familiar with it.
So maybe put an ad out. I know there was a couple. I don't know if they've been filled, but
Let me ask both of them.
Yeah,
And
okay.
then I think, yes, putting something on not all things Durham, the town's website and say, planning board is looking for alternates kind of deal and generating that, so.
yeah, I know Tyler mentioned, I think Wednesdays were just really hard for him.
It is difficult.
But I don't know if that was a long-term thing or short-term, so,
Yeah, good question, because I know that was just wherever he was going.
I
that
think
he was-
Boston.
In Boston, he was
Yeah.
spending all day or day plus, and it was difficult for him to
Yep.
make it back for 6:30.
Yep. All right, well, thanks for talking about schedules.
Yeah, and if you have a problem, just let me know, you know, if you, God forbid, get any of the various viruses that are out there, even if it's short notice, just let us know. And I hope that's not the case, but people do like to take vacation and stuff.
Yeah.
I can't afford it, so I stay home. So I tell my wife, I gotta go to the planning board. As George will tell you, I passed up an opportunity to see an old friend of mine to go and be there in September.
Wow, dedication.
Well, that plus I can't hang with them anymore. Okay, if nothing else, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
I'll second.
All in favor, raise a hand. Let's turn everything off. Please turn your mics off. Thank you all very much. This was a good.